Hey guys, this tutorial is going to go over how to backup and migrate the eXist-db database software used in ESTEST between versions 1.40 to 1.41 on the localhost server. Even though we're showing how to backup and migrate between versions, this process is equally applicable to backup and migrate the same eXist-db software database version between different servers. Okay, so the first thing to note is that we have our localhost server up and running. That means that the Apache web server is running, as well as the old previous eXist-db server 1.40 is also running. The first thing we need to do is to stop the Apache web server. So go to wherever Apache is installed and issue the command sudo /bin apache stop. And then we can verify that the web server has stopped running. Next, we want to go to wherever the eXist-db 1.40 is installed, and while the server is still running, we want to issue the command /bin client.sh to open up the eXist-db client and go to log in with your admin account. And what we need to do is create a backup of the entire eXist-db database. The way to do that is go to Tools, Backup, and then you can change the path where the backup is going to go. It stores it as a zip file. We'll stick with the default path and say OK. And this could take a while depending on how large your database is. But once this is done, we can see the file on the desktop here. We can close the client and then stop this version of this eXist-db server with the command /bin shutdown and the parameter with your password to the admin account. Okay, so we can see that this version of eXist is stopped running. Next, we want to start up the new version of eXist, and so we want to go to where that version is installed. In this case, it's going to be this directory, and issue the command sudo and startup.sh. And we just wait a few minutes for the server to start. Okay, so once the server is started, we're going to go back into the client, going to the correct location where the new version of eXist is located, and then again go into the client, and then log in with your admin account. And we're going to restore that previous backup we had made with the old version of eXist. So again, we go to Tools, Restore, and then look for the zip file containing the backup. In this case, it's home tester desktop and then exist backup.zip. Enter in your admin password. And then again, we have to wait for a few moments while this restores all the files from the previous version of eXist. Okay, so we can refresh the database and see that everything has been restored from our old version of eXist to the newer version of eXist. So we can close the client, and while the new version of the eXist server is still running, we want to reinitialize it with the ESTEST software. So we don't do anything to stop the server, and we go back now to where our ESTEST is installed. In this case, it's desktop ESTEST. And basically, while we have the new version of eXist started up, we're going to run again the installation process for ESTEST. And so that's make install. And then go through and enter in your enter in your credentials for the SVN server for ESTEST, and then go through and answer the interactive installation process. except in this case we want to specify the full path for the new version of eXist installed. That's 1.4.1. And we can pretty much use most of the same parameters as before. Okay, in this question when we say you want to re-index the collection, during this backup and migration process, it's a good idea to re-index now in the reinstallation, and that means it's going to refresh the index of the eXist database for the files that you just restored. So just say yes here, and then again this could take a few moments depending on the size of your database. Okay, now that's done, we ask the standard question, do you want to use the Apache web server? And if you're using it before, you're going to say yes again. And then enter in your eXist password one last time to initialize the plugins. And so we're done with the ESTEST make install command, or the installation process for ESTEST, and that has generated a new httpd.sample.include.conf referencing the newer version of eXist. I can show you here. We see here that for eXist it's, well, I mean it's pretty much the same depending on what you actually specified for the localhost server for eXist. But in any case, we want to be using this newer version of httpd.sample.conf just in case anything changed. So we go back to our Apache here and then edit the configuration file. And at the end, we want to delete the old instance of the include file and then read in the new one. Okay, so we save that configuration file and quit out of this, and at this point we can restart the Apache web server. And we go back to our localhost server, hit refresh, and we see that now this is perfectly restored. And in case we were wondering, we can go to the 8080 and go to eXist. And we can see here that the version of eXist has been 1.41. It's hard to see, but now we're using 1.41 of eXist. So that's basically the steps it takes to back up and migrate between versions of eXist on the same server. And again, you can use the same process to migrate between servers using the same software version of eXist.